Hey, I'm Anna, and it's good to be with you again in our series on Acts. Knowing how to connect with others is important, especially when you want to introduce them to Jesus. Coach Donna Amidon shares wisdom for this, as well as other discipleship tips in the next 5 episodes. So let's join her as we study the Acts of the Apostles then and now.
Hey friends, my name is Donna Amidon, and today we're diving into Acts chapter 17. A few years ago, my husband and I watched a friend perform live in concert. He was an amazing musician and spent the evening singing and playing his guitar, but at the very end, he did something that my husband and I still talk about to this day. Out of nowhere, he picked up a violin and launched into this jaw-dropping piece, and my husband and I just looked at each other in shock because our friend went from being this talented musician to someone with so much more ability than we realized. And I feel like that's what we're seeing today with Paul in Acts chapter 17. To this point, Paul has been passionate about preaching to the Jews, but here in Athens, it changes. He's talking to philosophers, to scholars, people devoted to ideas and reason. And just like our friends showed a new side of his gifting at the concert, here, Paul reveals a new side of his gifting in Athens. Now, let's look at what he says to the Athenians in verse 23. For I passed along and observed the objects of your worship. I found also an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. You see, Paul's approach was brilliant. He didn't begin with the Old Testament because it would have meant very little to these philosophers. Instead, Paul starts with something familiar, something concrete. He draws their attention to their altars inscribed to the unknown God. Let's pick it up in verse 24. Paul says, "The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. Nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything." Isn't this beautiful? Paul says that God is not this distant deity confined to a temple. He is personal. He is close. Paul makes it even more personal in verse 27. He says that God made people so that they would seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. These men had perceived God as distant and unknowable, but Paul's message was clear and compelling. God is real. God is near, and he desires a relationship with them. You know, as I reflect on Paul's ministry in Athens, I'm struck by this example of how to engage with an unbeliever. I want to share 3 quick observations. To begin, Paul connects with compassion. Paul didn't just appear out of the blue to share his message. In fact, before even preaching his message, Paul was in the market every day with those who happened to be there. He was there, connecting to the people. Secondly, Paul builds a bridge to belief. When Paul preached, he didn't start by quoting the Old Testament. Instead, he built a bridge by using something familiar to them, their altar to the unknown God. And not only that, Paul ended his message by quoting their poets. It would be like you or me quoting a line from a movie or a popular song to connect with someone. He met them where they were. Third, Paul trusted God with the results. Let's look at how the people in Athens responded to him. Verse 32 says, "Now when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, but others said, 'We will hear you again about this.' But some men joined him and believed." Here we see 3 responses. Some mocked, others wanted to hear more later, and others believed. What a great reminder to us. We don't need to measure our success by how many people respond right away. Our role is to be faithful. So friends, let's learn from Paul's wisdom. He connected with compassion, he built bridges to belief, and he trusted God with the outcome. In your experience, how does this approach work? We'd love to see your comments below.